Ryan watched Jade pack her overnight bag, the same ritual he'd observed countless Friday afternoons. 3 novels nestled beside her carefully selected outfits, more stylish than any book club should warrant. "Which book is the group discussing this weekend?" he asked, working to keep his tone casual, despite the knot tightening in his stomach. "Oh, something about Paris," Jade replied, without looking up, her fingers lingering too long on the silk blouse she'd recently purchased. 3 years together had taught Ryan to read between her lines, to recognize the slight pitch change in her voice when questions about these weekends arose. He loved her, trusted her, wanted to trust her, yet something in her distant smile didn't align with innocent literary discussions. As she zipped the bag closed, Ryan wondered what chapters of their relationship remained unread between them. The familiar sound of a zipper closing echoed through their apartment as Ryan leaned against the bedroom doorframe. Jade was packing her overnight bag, the same sleek weekender she'd purchased specifically for these Friday afternoon rituals. 3 years into their relationship, and these book club weekends had become as predictable as the changing seasons. "Need any help?" Ryan asked, watching as she methodically arranged her belongings, a carefully selected outfit for Saturday night that seemed more suited for a restaurant than someone's living room, toiletries in their designated pouch, and 3 paperback novels stacked neatly to one side. Jade glanced up with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I think I've got it. Thanks, though." The digital clock on their nightstand flashed 4:30 p.m. In 30 minutes, Jade would kiss him goodbye and vanish until Sunday afternoon, just as she had nearly every weekend for the past 8 months. "Which books are you discussing this time?" Ryan moved closer, genuinely curious, despite the subtle unease that had been growing inside him. "Oh, this one." Jade held up a novel with a Parisian streetscape on the cover, but quickly returned it to her bag. "The other 2 are options for next month." Ryan nodded, noting how she'd angled her body slightly away from him, closing off the conversation as surely as she'd closed her weekender bag. He remembered the early days of their relationship, when weekends meant spontaneous road trips or lazy mornings making breakfast together. When had that changed? "Sounds interesting," he offered, though he couldn't recall the last time she'd actually discussed any book from these weekends. "It is." Jade checked her phone, her shoulders relaxing when she saw the time. "My ride should be here soon." As she moved past him toward the bathroom, Ryan caught a whiff of her perfume, the special occasion one she rarely wore around their apartment. Sunday evening settled around them like a comfortable blanket as Ryan placed 2 mugs of tea on the coffee table. Jade had returned an hour ago, greeting him with a quick kiss before disappearing into the shower. Now, freshly changed and curled up on their sofa, she scrolled through her phone while the television murmured in the background. "So how was the book club?" Ryan asked, settling beside her with deliberate casualness. "Did everyone like the Paris book?" Jade set her phone down. "It was good. We had some interesting discussions." "What was the book about exactly? I don't think you mentioned." A flicker of something, annoyance, concern, crossed her face before disappearing behind a smile. "It's about this woman who reinvents herself in Paris after a divorce. You probably wouldn't like it. Lots of internal monologues about finding yourself." Ryan sipped his tea. "I might. The author's name?" "Sarah. Something. I don't remember her last name." Jade reached for her mug. "The hostess chooses the books, and we just show up." "Where was it held this time? I don't think you mentioned." "Jennifer's place." Jade blew on her tea, though it wasn't hot enough to warrant it. "It's in that new development across town." "The one near the park?" Ryan asked. No, the other side. Jade shifted, tucking her feet beneath her. Anyway, how was your weekend? Did you catch the game with Mark? Ryan noticed the deflection, but allowed it. Yeah, his team lost. He wasn't great company afterward. That's too bad. Jade's shoulders relaxed slightly at the subject change. Hey, did you remember to pick up more coffee? We're almost out. I forgot, sorry. Ryan watched her face carefully. Maybe next time I could drop you off at book club. Save whoever's driving the trouble? Jade's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Oh, that's not necessary. We have a whole carpool system worked out. Besides, you'd have to drive all the way back home afterward. I wouldn't mind, Ryan persisted gently. I could even wait and meet everyone. I like books too, you know. It's just... Jade brushed her hair behind her ear, a nervous habit he'd noticed years ago. It's kind of become our thing, just us girls. Adding someone new might change the dynamic. Even just to say hello? Maybe sometime, she said, reaching for the remote. Just not right now. The group is sensitive. Some people share really personal things while discussing the books. Ryan nodded slowly, the gap between her words and his instincts widening like a crack in thin ice. He had always trusted Jade, but the mathematical precision of her deflections was becoming harder to ignore. Of course, he said finally, I understand. But he wasn't sure he did. Wednesday afternoon sunshine streamed through the apartment windows as Ryan searched for his missing laptop charger. Jade was at work, the apartment quiet except for the occasional hum of the refrigerator. He'd already checked his office, the living room, and their bedroom without success. Glancing at Jade's desk in the corner of their shared office space, he hesitated. They respected each other's privacy, but surely looking for a charger wouldn't cross any boundaries. He opened the top drawer. Pens, sticky notes, paper clips, nothing unusual. The second drawer held more of the same office supplies. The bottom drawer stuck slightly as he pulled it open. Inside, neatly organized, were what appeared to be receipts and membership cards. His charger wasn't there, but something caught his eye. A glossy business card with a familiar name. Dylan Mercer, investment consultant. Ryan froze. Dylan. Jade's ex-boyfriend from before they'd met, the one she'd claimed to have no contact with for years. His fingers trembled slightly as he picked up the card. Flipping it over, he found a handwritten note. Same time next weekend. Can't wait. D. The handwriting wasn't Jade's, and the card looked relatively new, the edges still crisp. Below it was a receipt from a restaurant, dated 2 weekends ago during Jade's supposed book club, an expensive restaurant that required reservations weeks in advance. Ryan sat back on his heels, his search for the charger forgotten. The pieces assembled themselves with merciless clarity. The carefully selected outfits, the special perfume, the vague book discussions, the reluctance to introduce him to the group. There was no book club. There was Dylan. A cold weight settled in Ryan's stomach as he carefully replaced the items exactly as he'd found them and closed the drawer. The evidence wasn't definitive, but it was enough to confirm the suspicions he'd been trying to ignore for months. Standing slowly, Ryan moved to the window, gazing at the neighborhood below without really seeing it. His mind raced through possible explanations, each scenario less comforting than the last. The boundary between trust and naivety had never felt so paper-thin. By the time Jade returned home that evening, Ryan had found his charger and composed his thoughts. He needed to confront her, but not rashly. He needed truth, not accusations. And as he heard her key in the lock, one question burned brighter than all others. How much of their relationship was as fictional as her book club? Ryan stood in the kitchen, Dylan's business card burning a hole in his pocket. He'd placed the dinner plates on the table with mechanical precision, each movement deliberate as he waited for Jade to return from work. When he finally heard her key in the lock, he drew a deep breath. "Hey," she called, dropping her bag by the door. "Something smells good." "Just pasta," Ryan replied, his voice carefully neutral. "Thought we could eat together tonight." Jade smiled as she entered the kitchen, but faltered when she caught his expression. "Everything okay?" Ryan pulled out the business card and placed it on the table between them. "I found this today, in your desk drawer." The color drained from Jade's face. For 3 heartbeats, neither spoke. "You went through my things?" Her voice rose slightly, accusation replacing shock. "I was looking for my charger," Ryan said. "But that's not the point, is it? Same time next weekend. Can't wait. That's not book club, Jade. That's Dylan." Her eyes darted to the exit as if calculating an escape route. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" "Because I also found a receipt from La Maison, dated during your supposed book club." "You had no right—" "No, Jade," Ryan cut her off, his voice tight. "You had no right to lie to me for months. There is no book club, is there?" She crossed her arms, creating a physical barrier between them. "Not exactly, no. So, you've been seeing Dylan, your ex-boyfriend, the one you told me you hadn't spoken to in years?" "We're just friends now," Jade insisted, moving to the counter, putting more distance between them. "It's completely innocent." "Innocent enough that you created an elaborate lie about it?" Ryan's calm was cracking. "Why not just tell me you were meeting a friend?" "Because I knew you'd react like this. You'd be jealous and make it into something it's not." "I'm not reacting to you having a friend. I'm reacting to you lying to me for months." Ryan's hands trembled slightly as he gripped the back of a chair. "What else haven't you told me?" Jade's defensiveness flickered. "Nothing. I swear. We just meet up sometimes to talk. He understands things about me, my career goals, my family issues, in ways that what? I don't?" The pain in Ryan's voice was raw. "That's not what I meant." Jade's eyes welled with tears. "Please, Ryan." "It's really not romantic. I didn't know how to tell you." Ryan stared at her, searching for truth in her expression. "How am I supposed to believe anything you say now?" The pasta on the stove boiled over, hissing as it hit the burner. Neither moved to turn it off. They'd migrated to the living room, the untouched dinner forgotten. Ryan sat on the edge of the armchair while Jade took the couch, the coffee table between them like a neutral zone in contested territory. "I should have told you," Jade admitted, clutching a throw pillow against her chest. "I ran into him at a networking event last year. It was completely unexpected." Ryan watched her carefully. And we got talking. About old times, career stuff. He's doing really well in investment banking now." She tucked her hair behind her ear. "It was nice to reconnect with someone who knew me before everything." "Before me, you mean," Ryan said quietly. Jade sighed. "That's not fair." "I just meant before my dad got sick, before I changed career paths." Ryan leaned forward. "So these weekends, what exactly happens?" "We meet for dinner or drinks. Sometimes with other friends from college. We talk about work, life." She paused. "Dylan's been helping me with some investment planning, too." "For 8 months? Every weekend?" "Not every weekend," Jade corrected. "But yes, regularly." Ryan absorbed this, noting the careful omissions in her explanation. And you created a fictional book club because I knew how it would sound. Ex-boyfriend, regular meetings. She met his eyes directly for the first time. There's nothing romantic happening, Ryan. I promise you that. Then why the secrecy? Why not just introduce me to him? Jade fidgeted with the pillow's fringe. Dylan can be intense. Our breakup wasn't great. I think I worried that meeting you would be awkward for him. So you prioritized his comfort over honesty with me. Ryan's statement hung in the air. I didn't see it that way, Jade said softly. I thought I was avoiding unnecessary drama. Ryan reached for his water glass, buying time to process. The explanation was plausible, yet incomplete, like a novel with key chapters torn out. These meetings, he said finally, do they need to be on weekends? Do they need to be just the two of you? Jade hesitated. No, I suppose not. And the note on his card, can't wait? That's just how he talks. He's always been enthusiastic like that. Ryan nodded slowly, weighing her words against the gnawing doubt in his gut. She wasn't telling him everything, but she wasn't entirely lying either. The truth lay somewhere in between, in the spaces between the lines. Morning light streamed through the kitchen windows as Ryan placed a cup of coffee in front of Jade. They'd spent a restless night in the same bed, separated by inches that felt like miles. I've been thinking, Ryan began, taking the seat across from her. I want to make this work, but we need some changes. Jade wrapped her hands around her mug. What kind of changes? For starters, I'd like to meet Dylan. Ryan's tone was calm but firm. If he's just a friend helping with investments, there's no reason I shouldn't know him. Jade took a careful sip before answering. Okay, that seems reasonable. And I think these meetings should happen at more transparent times, not entire weekends away. They're not entire weekends, Jade countered, then softened. But I understand what you're saying. Ryan nodded, encouraged by her apparent receptiveness. I don't want to control who you're friends with, Jade. I just need honesty, complete honesty. Of course, she agreed quickly. I hate that I've damaged your trust. I'll do whatever it takes to rebuild it. There's one more thing, Ryan said, meeting her eyes. I'd like us to spend more time together on weekends, like we used to. Maybe we could plan a trip next month. Jade smiled, reaching across the table to take his hand. I'd like that. I miss our road trips. Ryan squeezed her hand, feeling cautiously hopeful. So we have a plan. Transparency, meeting Dylan, more us time. Yes, Jade nodded, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. It's a good plan. And no more lies, Ryan added softly, even small ones, even to avoid drama. No more lies, she echoed, withdrawing her hand to check her phone. I should get ready for work. As Jade left the kitchen, Ryan remained at the table, turning his coffee cup slowly. Her agreements had come too easily, without the resistance he'd expected. The conversation felt like applying a bandage to a wound that needed stitches, a temporary fix that wouldn't hold under pressure. Still, it was a start. He wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that their 3 years together meant more than whatever was happening with Dylan. The boundaries were reasonable, the compromise fair. So why did satisfaction feel so elusive? Why did resolution seem just out of reach? Ryan finished his coffee and rinsed the cup, watching the coffee grounds circle the drain before disappearing. Some part of him wondered if trust, once broken, could ever fully return, or if it would always carry the hairline fractures of doubt, waiting for the next pressure point to crack completely. The calendar on their refrigerator showed 3 weeks of relative calm since the talk. Ryan had circled next Saturday in red. Their planned day trip to the coast, the first weekend excursion they'd scheduled in months. Beside it, Jade had written, "Can't wait," in her looping handwriting. "Coffee's ready," Ryan called, pouring 2 mugs as Jade entered the kitchen, already dressed for work. She kissed his cheek as she accepted her cup, a casual intimacy that had been gradually returning. "Thanks. I've got that client presentation today," she said, leaning against the counter. "Wish me luck?" "You'll nail it," Ryan replied with genuine confidence. "Text me when it's done." Jade nodded, smiling. Of course. These small check-ins had become their new normal. More communication, more transparency about their daily lives. The wounds from their confrontation had begun to heal, scabbing over with renewed attention to their relationship. Last weekend, Ryan had finally met Dylan, a brief, slightly awkward coffee meeting that lasted exactly 30 minutes. Dylan had been polite if reserved, and Ryan had found him neither as charming nor as threatening as he'd imagined, just a man in an expensive suit with a firm handshake and careful eyes. "Should I pick up something for dinner on my way home?" Jade asked, gathering her things. "I was thinking of making that pasta you like," Ryan replied. "Perfect." She glanced at her watch. "I should go. Love you." "Love you too." As the door closed behind her, Ryan sipped his coffee, surveying their shared space with cautious optimism. Things were better, not perfect, but better. Jade had kept her word about being more transparent, had included him more, had stayed home on weekends. Still, beneath the surface calm, Ryan occasionally caught glimpses of something else. How Jade checked her phone when she thought he wasn't looking, her slight hesitation when he asked about her day, the way her smile sometimes seemed rehearsed rather than spontaneous. But perhaps that was just his lingering doubt, the after-effects of broken trust still working through his system. Relationships took work, especially after a breach. He was trying. They both were. Ryan rinsed his cup and placed it in the dishwasher, ready to believe in their second chance. "So things are good now?" Mark asked, taking a long pull from his beer. Ryan and his colleague sat at a corner table in their regular after-work pub, the Thursday evening crowd creating a comfortable buffer of ambient noise around them. "Yeah," Ryan nodded, turning his glass slowly. "I think we're back on track. She's been different, more present. And this Dylan guy, you're okay with him being in the picture?" Ryan shrugged. "I met him. He seemed fine. Professional. They keep their meetings to lunch hours now." He paused. "Is it crazy that I still feel uneasy sometimes?" Mark considered this. "Trust is like a vase, man. Once it's broken and glued back together, you're always going to see the cracks." "That's cheerful," Ryan said with a wry smile. "Just being honest. Look, you've been together, what, 3 years? That counts for something." Ryan nodded, his mind drifting to earlier that day when he'd called Jade at lunch and she hadn't answered. She'd texted 20 minutes later saying she'd been in a meeting, but the explanation had felt rehearsed too smooth. "I keep second-guessing myself," Ryan admitted. "Am I being paranoid? Or am I ignoring red flags because I want things to work?" "Hard to say," Mark replied. "But here's what I know. If you're constantly questioning things, that's its own answer." Ryan stared into his beer, the amber liquid reflecting the pub's dim lights. "I love her." "Never said you didn't." "But is love enough if trust is damaged?" Mark didn't answer immediately. "Only you can answer that." Ryan's phone buzzed. A text from Jade saying she'd be home late because of a work dinner. The message was clear, informative, exactly what their new communication agreement called for, so why did it feel hollow? "What does your gut tell you?" Mark asked, cutting through Ryan's thoughts. "My gut?" Ryan considered the question, searching for the truth beneath layers of hope and fear. My gut says something still isn't right, but my heart wants to believe her. And your head? My head says I need more evidence before making any decisions. Ryan sighed. Pretty pathetic, huh? 3 parts of me, 3 different answers. Not pathetic, human. Mark signaled for another round. Just don't ignore that gut feeling completely. It's usually trying to tell you something. Ryan nodded slowly, feeling the weight of choices looming ahead. What troubled him most wasn't suspicion of what Jade might be doing. It was doubt about his own judgment, his ability to recognize truth from performance. Was he seeing problems that weren't there, or ignoring ones that were? The answer felt just beyond his grasp, like a word on the tip of his tongue, present but unspoken. I'm just saying, it doesn't make sense to change our plans now, Jade said, frustration edging her voice. They stood in their kitchen, the remains of dinner still on the table between them. What had started as a casual conversation about weekend plans had quickly escalated. It's not about changing plans, Ryan replied. It's about the fact that you made these plans with Dylan without telling me until now, the day before our trip. Jade sighed dramatically. It's a networking event, Ryan, a huge opportunity. Dylan got me an invitation last minute. And our coastal trip? The one we've had planned for 3 weeks? We can go next weekend, Jade said, as if offering a reasonable compromise. This is important for my career. Ryan studied her face, noting the slight defensive tilt of her chin, the way her arms crossed protectively over her chest. The event is all day Saturday? And Sunday morning, she added, glancing away. It's at a resort upstate. All the major players in finance will be there. So you'd be staying overnight, with Dylan? With 200 other professionals, Jade corrected, her tone sharpening. Don't make it sound like that. Ryan took a deep breath. You promised me transparency, Jade, better communication, and yet, here we are, you changing plans last minute for a weekend away with him. This isn't about Dylan. This is about my career. Her voice rose. You know I've been working toward a position like this. I do know that. I support that. What I don't support is how this is happening. Ryan leaned against the counter, creating physical space between them. If this were really about career networking, you would have told me the moment Dylan mentioned it. You would have discussed it with me before agreeing. So now I need your permission for work events? That's not what I said, and you know it. Jade's eyes flashed. What exactly are you saying then? I'm saying I can't do this anymore. This cycle of half-truths and last-minute revelations, it's exhausting. Ryan's voice was steady, despite the storm building inside him. I need you to choose, Jade. Choose what? Whether our relationship comes first, or whatever is happening with Dylan. Jade stared at him. You're asking me to choose between my relationship and my career? No. I'm asking you to choose between honest partnership and whatever this is. Ryan gestured between them. If you go this weekend, after everything we've discussed, after all the boundaries we've agreed on, then I have my answer about what matters to you. That's not fair, Jade said, her voice dropping. You're giving me an ultimatum. I'm asking for clarity. Either our agreements matter or they don't. Silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. I can't believe you're doing this, Jade finally said, anger displacing her initial shock. If you trusted me, if you really loved me, you'd understand why this matters. If you respected me, if you really loved me, you wouldn't put me in this position again, Ryan countered quietly. Jade grabbed her phone from the table. I need to go for a walk. We need to finish this conversation. She turned at the door, eyes hard. Fine. If that's how you feel, then maybe we shouldn't be together. If you don't trust me hanging out with my ex every weekend, maybe we shouldn't be in a relationship at all." The words hung in the air, a challenge and a revelation all at once. Ryan felt something shift inside him, clarity emerging from chaos. Maybe you're right. Silence filled the kitchen after Jade's ultimatum. Ryan leaned against the counter, acutely aware of the space between them, more than physical distance now, but a fundamental chasm in values. "I didn't want it to come to this," he said finally, his voice low but steady. "But I can't keep compromising my self-respect." Jade's expression shifted from defiance to disbelief. "You're actually ending things? Over a work event?" "No, Jade, not over an event. Over a pattern." Ryan straightened, finding a strange calm amidst the chaos. "Over your consistent choice to prioritize time with Dylan over our agreements and our relationship. That's not fair." "Let me finish," Ryan said, his tone firm but not harsh. "For months, I've tried to understand, to be reasonable. I agreed to meet Dylan. I accepted your friendship with him. All I asked for was honesty and reasonable boundaries." Jade crossed her arms. "And I've given you that." "Have you? Because from where I stand, you've given me just enough to keep me quiet, while continuously pushing those boundaries back. So what are you saying?" Her voice had a dangerous edge. "I'm saying it's over." The words hung in the air, both painful and liberating. "I deserve a relationship built on mutual respect and honesty. This isn't that anymore." Jade's eyes widened, her strategy shifting visibly. "Ryan, wait! You're overreacting." She moved toward him, her voice softening. "We can talk about this. Maybe I can see if someone else can take my place at the event. Don't you see?" Ryan shook his head. "The fact that you're only willing to consider that now, after I've ended things, that just confirms I'm making the right decision. You can't just throw away 3 years over a misunderstanding. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's a fundamental disagreement about what respect looks like in a relationship." Ryan felt an unexpected steadiness as he spoke. "I'd like you to move out by the end of the month. I'll stay with Mark until you can arrange things." Jade's facade cracked, anger flashing through. "You'll regret this. You're making a huge mistake." "Maybe," Ryan acknowledged, "but it's my mistake to make." He moved past her toward the bedroom, needing to pack an overnight bag. Jade followed, her voice rising with desperation. "Ryan, please, I love you. We can work this out." He paused at the bedroom door, feeling a complex mixture of grief and clarity. "I loved you too, Jade. But love isn't enough without trust and respect." As he packed his essentials, Jade's pleas turned to recriminations, then to cold silence. By the time he left the apartment, neither had more words to offer. Just the hollow echo of a chapter closing with no possibility of revision. 2 weeks later, Ryan sat across from Catherine Evans, the regional director of his firm, in the sleek conference room overlooking the city skyline. His temporary living arrangement at Mark's apartment had become a strange new normal, punctuated by awkward exchanges with Jade as she gradually moved her things out of their shared space. "So," Catherine said, sliding a folder across the polished table, "have you given any thought to what we discussed last quarter?" Ryan opened the folder, scanning the documents inside. The London office expansion. "Yes, though I assumed Jenkins would be handling the transition. Jenkins decided to stay stateside for family reasons." Catherine leaned forward. "You were my first choice anyway. Your client retention numbers are impressive, and the London team specifically requested someone with your background. Ryan looked up from the papers. You're offering me the position? 3-year minimum commitment, significant salary increase, relocation package. Catherine's direct gaze was evaluative, but not unkind. It would mean starting over in a new city, but with your experience, you'd hit the ground running. The team there is solid. Ryan studied the offer letter, the details blurring slightly as his mind raced. London. An ocean away from the apartment he'd shared with Jade, from the remnants of their broken relationship, from the constant reminders. The timing is unexpected, he admitted. Catherine nodded, seeming to sense the weight behind his words. Personal circumstances change. And sometimes professional opportunities align with those changes. She paused. I don't need an answer today. Take 2 weeks to consider it. When would they need me to start? Ideally within a month. The expansion is already underway. Ryan closed the folder, his thoughts a swirling mix of apprehension and possibility. A month ago, he wouldn't have considered leaving. Now, the prospect of a fresh start held an undeniable appeal. May I ask what's holding you back? Catherine asked, reading his hesitation. Ryan considered the question. It's a big move, leaving everything familiar behind. True, but sometimes distance provides perspective. Catherine stood, signaling the end of their meeting. Life rarely offers clean breaks, Ryan. But when it does, there can be wisdom in taking them. Walking back to his temporary desk, Ryan felt the weight of the folder in his hand, heavier than its physical presence, laden with potential. Starting over in London wasn't running away, it was moving toward something new. The thought both terrified and exhilarated him. He sat at his desk, opening his laptop to research London neighborhoods, cost of living, the practicalities of international relocation. Each search, each image of Thameside apartments and historic streets felt like glimpses into a possible future, one he'd never imagined for himself, but which now seemed to offer precisely what he needed: distance, challenge, and the chance to rediscover himself beyond the shadow of betrayal. I debated whether to tell you this, Mark said, his expression unusually serious, as they sat in his living room 3 days later. But as you're making decisions about London, I thought you should have all the facts. Ryan set down his coffee mug, a sense of foreboding settling over him. What is it? Mark hesitated, then pulled out his phone. Sarah, you remember my cousin, who works at Meridian Financial? Ryan nodded. Meridian was Dylan's firm. She saw Jade and Dylan together at their company party last weekend. Mark scrolled through his messages. She didn't know your situation, just mentioned it casually because she remembered meeting you once. Jade at Dylan's company party? Ryan processed this. Not entirely surprising, given everything. There's more. Mark looked uncomfortable. According to Sarah, they weren't exactly hiding their relationship. She overheard some colleagues talking about how they've been seeing each other for almost a year. Apparently, it's common knowledge at Meridian. The information hit Ryan like a physical blow, confirmation of what he'd suspected, but hoped wasn't true. A year, he repeated, the timeline aligning with the beginning of Jade's book club weekends. And Mark hesitated again. Dylan apparently has another girlfriend, too. Someone named Olivia, who works in their marketing department. She was out of town for the party, but people were talking about how Dylan's juggling both relationships. Ryan stared at his friend, the full picture finally coming into focus. Not only had Jade been having an affair, but she was involved with someone who was deceiving her as well. The irony might have been amusing if it weren't so painful. I'm sorry, man. Mark said quietly. "I thought you should know." Ryan nodded, strangely calm as the pieces fell into place. "Thank you for telling me." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. The revelation should have devastated him, but instead it brought an unexpected clarity, a final confirmation that his instincts had been right all along. "You know what's strange?" Ryan said after a long moment. "I feel relieved, like I've been carrying this weight of doubt, wondering if I was being unreasonable or paranoid." He turned back to Mark. "Now I know I wasn't. Does it change anything about London?" Ryan considered the question, the job offer that had been occupying his thoughts for days. "Actually, it does." He felt a certainty solidifying within him. "I'm going to take it." "You sure?" "Yes." Ryan's voice grew stronger. "Not to run away from this, but because I deserve a fresh start. Because there's nothing holding me here anymore." The truth, painful as it was, had freed him from the lingering tendrils of hope and doubt. Jade's betrayal had been real, deeper even than he'd imagined. Dylan's character was exactly what Ryan had suspected. And his own judgment, his own instincts that he'd begun to question, had been trustworthy all along. "I'll call Catherine tomorrow," Ryan said, a sense of purpose filling the void where pain had been. "Let her know I'm accepting the London position." As the decision crystallized, Ryan felt something unexpected amid the hurt, a quiet excitement about what lay ahead, a life unbound from deception, a chance to rebuild on foundations of truth rather than illusion. London wasn't an escape. It was an opportunity to honor what he now knew with absolute certainty, that he deserved better and had the courage to seek it. London greeted Ryan with persistent drizzle as his taxi navigated the narrow streets from Heathrow. Through rain-streaked windows, centuries-old architecture blended with modern glass structures, all unfamiliar yet oddly comforting in their distance from everything he'd left behind. His company-arranged flat in Clerkenwell surprised him, more spacious than expected, with tall windows overlooking a quiet courtyard. The previous tenant had left behind a potted plant, still thriving on the windowsill. Ryan set his suitcase down beside it, running his fingers over its waxy leaves. "Not a bad welcome committee," he murmured to himself. The next morning, he navigated the Underground to his new office near Liverpool Street, following the tide of commuters streaming through the station. The London office occupied 3 floors of a sleek building, its reception area displaying the same logo as his previous workplace. Yet everything else felt refreshingly different. "Ryan, welcome to London." Eliza Harlow, his new supervisor, approached with an extended hand. "How was the flight? Settled in all right?" "Still adjusting to the time difference," Ryan admitted. "But the flat's great. Thank you for arranging everything. Let me introduce you around." Eliza led him through an open workspace where a dozen people glanced up with curious smiles. "Everyone, this is Ryan Harrison, our new client director from the States." A chorus of greetings followed, accents ranging from crisp British to Scottish, Indian, and others Ryan couldn't immediately place. The international diversity surprised him, creating an immediate sense of being part of something larger than his previous experience. "Coffee?" offered James, a bearded man from the adjacent desk. "Fair warning, it's proper strong here, not that watered-down American stuff." Ryan smiled, his first genuine one in weeks. "Sounds perfect, actually." As James walked him to the break room, pointing out office landmarks, Ryan felt something unexpected, a lightness in his chest, as if the physical distance from his past had created space for something new to grow. 3 weeks into his London life, Ryan found himself at the top of Primrose Hill on a rare, clear Sunday. Below him stretched the London skyline, St. Paul's Dome, the jagged Shard, the slowly turning eye, a panorama of possibilities he was just beginning to explore. He'd fallen into a rhythm, work during the week, exploration on weekends. Each neighborhood visit, each interaction with locals, each small triumph of navigating the city without Google Maps felt like another step away from the person he'd been. "Beautiful day for it," said a voice beside him. Ryan turned to find an older gentleman with a walking stick admiring the same view. "It is," Ryan agreed. "I'm still getting used to how rare the sunshine is here." "Ah, you're American," the man smiled. "Holiday or relocated?" "Relocated. For work." "Bold move. I'm Walter, by the way." "Ryan." They shook hands. "What brought you across the pond, if you don't mind my asking? Besides work, that is." Ryan considered the question, surprising himself with his candor. "A fresh start." Walter nodded knowingly. "London's good for those. This city has a way of helping you reinvent yourself. Been here 70 years myself, still discovering new corners." They stood in companionable silence, watching clouds cast moving shadows across the city. "The thing about distance," Walter said eventually, "is it changes your perspective. Problems that seemed enormous back home often shrink when viewed from afar." Ryan thought about Jade, about the betrayal that had consumed him just weeks ago. From here, thousands of miles away, he could see their relationship with clarity he'd lacked when immersed in it, the pattern of small compromises, the gradual erosion of boundaries, the red flags he'd ignored in the name of love. "I needed this," Ryan said quietly. "The distance. We all do sometimes." Walter smiled. "The trick is knowing what to carry forward and what to leave behind." As the older man bid him goodbye and continued his walk, Ryan remained, letting the vastness of London remind him how small his past troubles were in the grand scheme. He wasn't diminishing the pain. It had been real, significant, but from this vantage point, he could see it wasn't his entire story. For the first time since discovering Dylan's business card, Ryan felt truly at peace with his decision to end things with Jade. Not out of anger or hurt, but from the recognition that he deserved a relationship built on mutual respect and honesty. The realization wasn't bitter, but liberating. He took a deep breath of the crisp air, feeling something shift inside him, not forgetting, but moving forward. The persistent knocking woke Ryan from a sound sleep. He blinked at his bedside clock, 11:47 p.m., and wondered if one of his neighbors had locked themselves out. The knocking came again, more insistent. Pulling on a t-shirt, he made his way to the door and peered through the peephole. His heart stuttered. Jade. He stood frozen, wondering if he was dreaming. She knocked again, and he noticed her disheveled appearance, the strain on her face. Slowly, he opened the door. "Ryan." Her voice broke on his name. She looked smaller somehow, her usual confidence replaced by something fragile. "I found you." "Jade." His own voice sounded distant to his ears. "How? What are you doing here?" "Can I come in? Please?" Against his better judgment, Ryan stepped aside. Jade entered his flat, her eyes darting around, taking in the space he'd made his own. "How did you find me?" he asked, keeping his distance. "Your office website listed you as part of the London team." She set down her bag, a carry-on suitcase with an airline tag still attached. "I flew out yesterday. I've been trying to work up the courage to come here." Ryan crossed his arms. "Why are you here, Jade?" "Because I made a terrible mistake." Her eyes welled with tears. Everything fell apart after you left. Dylan, it turns out he was seeing someone else too. Did you know that? I heard. And then the IRS flagged some inconsistencies in my tax returns from the investments Dylan helped me with. She laughed bitterly. Turns out his financial advice wasn't exactly above board. I'm facing potential fraud charges. Ryan felt a complicated mix of emotions: sympathy, vindication, wariness. I'm sorry to hear that. I've lost everything, Ryan. Jade moved toward him. My job is hanging by a thread. My reputation is in tatters, and I realized the only person who ever truly cared about me was you. Jade, I know I hurt you, she continued, her voice urgent. I know I betrayed your trust, but I've changed. These past months have shown me what matters, and it's you, Ryan. It's always been you. She stepped closer. I flew across an ocean to tell you that, to show you how serious I am about making things right. Ryan felt the pull of her familiar presence, the echo of feelings that had once seemed so central to his life. But beneath that pull was something stronger. The clarity he'd found on Primrose Hill, the peace he'd built in his new life. You can't just show up like this, he said quietly. This isn't a romantic gesture, Jade. It's an invasion. Her expression hardened slightly. So you've moved on completely? Found someone new already? That's not the point. Ryan maintained his distance. You hurt me deeply. You lied repeatedly. And now that things didn't work out with Dylan, you're here expecting... What exactly? A second chance, she whispered. Everyone deserves one, don't they? Ryan studied her face, seeing both the woman he'd loved and the patterns he'd finally escaped. The question hung between them, unanswered, as the London night pressed against his windows, his new world and his old colliding in a moment he never expected to face. Everyone deserves a second chance, Jade repeated, taking another step toward Ryan. The London rain tapped against the windows, creating a hushed atmosphere in his flat. Ryan gestured toward the small kitchen table. Let's sit down. They sat across from each other, the distance between them symbolic of the emotional gulf Ryan was determined to maintain. Jade's eyes were red-rimmed, her usual polished appearance disheveled by travel and stress. I understand you're going through a difficult time, Ryan began, his voice measured. And I'm genuinely sorry about that. But flying here unannounced doesn't change what happened between us. I know I made mistakes. They weren't mistakes, Jade. They were choices. Ryan's tone remained calm but firm. You chose to lie about the book club. You chose to spend weekends with Dylan while we were together. You chose to dismiss my concerns when I raised them. Jade's eyes welled with tears. I was confused. Dylan made me feel important, connected to my career goals, but it wasn't real. None of it was real like what we had. The problem is, what we had wasn't real either. Ryan folded his hands on the table. It was based on half-truths and manipulation. That's not fair, she protested. We had 3 good years together. We did, and I cherish those memories. But the last year wasn't honest, was it? Jade looked down. I never meant to hurt you. Intent doesn't erase impact, Ryan sighed. Look, I can forgive you, Jade. I have forgiven you. But that doesn't mean we should be together. You can't tell me you don't still have feelings for me, she said, reaching across the table for his hand. Ryan gently moved his hands away. Of course I still care about you. But I've also learned to care about myself, enough to recognize when a relationship isn't healthy. I've changed, she insisted, her voice breaking. These past months without you, facing everything alone, it's changed me. Maybe it has, Ryan acknowledged. And I hope you find happiness, truly, but not with me. Jade's expression hardened slightly. So that's it? You won't even try? I did try. For months, I tried to make it work, despite the lies and broken trust. There comes a point where trying becomes self-destruction. You're being cold, she accused, wiping away a tear. No, Ryan replied gently. I'm being clear. There's a difference. The silence between them stretched, filled only by the persistent London rain. The next morning, Ryan sat across from Eliza in the company's small conference room, his coffee untouched. I appreciate you making time, he said. I wanted to let you know about a personal situation that might affect things professionally. Eliza's expression remained neutral, professional. Go on. My ex-girlfriend showed up at my flat last night unannounced. She's from the States. I see. Eliza nodded thoughtfully. Do you anticipate this causing issues? I hope not, but I wanted to be transparent. Ryan hesitated. There's something else you should know. She mentioned facing potential tax fraud charges related to some investments. Eliza's eyebrows rose slightly. Tax fraud? She was involved with someone at Meridian Financial, Dylan Mercer. Apparently, he provided some questionable investment advice. Ryan maintained eye contact. I have no involvement in any of it, but given our firm's compliance standards, I thought you should know. I appreciate your candor. Eliza made a brief note. Actually, the name Meridian rings a bell. There was something in the Financial Times last week. She tapped at her tablet, then turned it toward Ryan. Here it is. The headline read, Meridian Financial under investigation. Multiple clients allege fraudulent practices. The article detailed how several Meridian advisors, including Dylan Mercer, were under investigation for tax schemes that had left clients facing potential legal consequences. It seems your ex wasn't the only one affected, Eliza observed. Ryan scanned the article, a complicated mix of emotions washing over him. There was no satisfaction in Jade's predicament, only a sense of how narrowly he'd avoided being caught in the same web. There's more, Eliza added, scrolling down. Mercer has apparently been terminated. The article mentions he's relocating to the UK to work for a subsidiary that wasn't implicated in the investigation. Ryan looked up sharply. He's moving to London? Apparently so. Eliza studied Ryan's face. Will that be a problem? No, Ryan said after a moment. London's a big city. Indeed. Eliza closed the tablet. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. As long as you have no financial entanglements with your ex or Meridian, there's no compliance issue for us. As Ryan left the meeting, the revelation about Dylan's relocation settled uncomfortably. Not because he feared encountering him, but because it represented another unexpected collision between his past and present. Yet beneath that discomfort was something else, a calm certainty that he could handle whatever came next. The Ryan who had discovered Dylan's business card months ago would have been shaken by these developments. The Ryan walking through London's financial district now felt steady, grounded in the knowledge that he had made the right choice in ending things with Jade, not just for his heart, but for his whole life. 2 weeks after Jade's departure, back to the States, with tearful promises to prove herself that Ryan gently but firmly declined, he found himself at a small gallery opening in Shoreditch. James, from work, had insisted he come along, arguing that Ryan needed to see more of London than just the office and your flat. The gallery was housed in a converted warehouse, its brick walls showcasing contemporary photography. Ryan wandered through the space, pleasantly surprised by how much he was enjoying himself. What do you think of this one? asked a voice beside him. Ryan turned to find a woman studying the same photograph. A black and white image of the Thames at dawn, the city's skyline reflected in its rippled surface. "I like how it captures both permanence and change," he replied. "The buildings look solid, but the water distorts them." She smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkling slightly. "That's exactly what I was thinking." "I'm Aoife, by the way." Her accent carried a lilting Irish cadence. "Ryan, nice to meet you." "American?" she asked. "That obvious?" "Just a bit," she laughed. "What brings you to London?" "Work transfer. Been here about 2 months now." "And the verdict so far?" Ryan considered. "I like it more than I expected to. There's something about this city that feels, I don't know, possibility-laden?" "That's a good way to put it." Aoife moved to the next photograph. "I felt the same when I moved here from Dublin 5 years ago. London has a way of reinventing itself, which makes it easier for people to do the same." There was something refreshingly direct about her manner. No pretense, no performance, just authentic interest and engagement. "Are you in finance too?" Ryan asked, noticing her professional attire. "Publishing, actually. I edit non-fiction books." She glanced at him with warm curiosity. "Let me guess. Investment banking?" "Client services for a consulting firm." "Less exciting than it sounds." "Most jobs are," she smiled. "The gallery's hosting a talk in the back room in a few minutes. The photographer is discussing his process. Care to join? They usually serve decent wine." Ryan felt a moment of hesitation, not because he didn't want to, but because it had been so long since he'd connected with someone new without second-guessing everything. "I'd like that," he said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. As they made their way to the back room, Ryan noticed how easy the conversation flowed, how none of Jade's manipulation tactics were present. No subtle put-downs disguised as jokes, no evasive answers, no sense that he was being managed rather than engaged with. "So, what brings an American consultant to a photography exhibition on a Thursday night?" Aoife asked as they found seats. "Attempting to have a life outside work," Ryan admitted. "My colleague James practically dragged me here, then promptly abandoned me to talk to the gallery owner." "Well, I'm glad he did," Aoife said simply. The lights dimmed as the photographer took his place at the front, but Ryan found himself more aware of Aoife beside him. Not with the anxious attraction he'd felt in his early days with Jade, but with a quiet interest in someone who seemed genuinely comfortable in her own skin. Whatever this was, friendship, maybe something more, it felt fundamentally different from what he'd known before. It felt real. 3 months into his London life, Ryan stepped into his building's elevator after a long day at work. As the doors began to close, a hand shot through the gap, triggering the sensors. The doors reopened to reveal a face he never expected to see in London. Dylan. Both men froze, recognition dawning simultaneously. Dylan's expression cycled through surprise, discomfort, and finally something like resignation as he stepped into the elevator. "Ryan," he said, his voice tight, "I didn't know you lived here." "Likewise." Ryan's pulse quickened, but his voice remained steady. "I heard you'd moved to London." The elevator began its ascent, the confined space intensifying the awkwardness between them. "4th floor," Dylan said, pressing the button. "6th," Ryan replied, noting with grim irony that Dylan would be living just 2 floors below him. Silence stretched between them as the elevator hummed upward. Ryan studied Dylan covertly. The man looked different than he remembered from their brief coffee meeting months ago. Less polished, more strained around the eyes. "I suppose we should address the elephant in the elevator," Dylan finally said. attempting a wry smile that didn't reach his eyes. "This is unexpected." "It is. Look, I know what you must think of me." "Do you?" Ryan asked, his tone neutral. Dylan sighed. "Probably not." He ran a hand through his hair. "But for what it's worth, I'm sorry about Jade, about the dishonesty. All of it." The elevator slowed, approaching the 4th floor. "The financial advice, too?" Ryan asked quietly. Dylan's posture stiffened. "You heard about that. It's why she came to London, the tax fraud issues." The doors opened at the 4th floor, but Dylan made no move to exit. "I didn't set out to hurt anyone," he said, his voice unexpectedly raw. "Things just spiraled. One compromise led to another." He held the door open with his hand. "Most of the building knows who I am, or what I did. No one speaks to me. Can't say I blame them." Ryan studied the man who had once seemed like a villain in his personal narrative. Now, stripped of power and pretense, Dylan just looked human. Flawed, regretful, paying the price for his choices. "We all make mistakes," Ryan said finally. "The question is what we learn from them." Dylan nodded slowly. "I'm learning. The hard way." He stepped out of the elevator, then turned back. "For what it's worth, she did care about you, more than she realized, until it was too late." As the doors closed between them, Ryan felt an unexpected sense of closure. Not because Dylan had suffered, but because in that brief exchange, the power the past held over him had diminished, replaced by something more valuable: understanding. That evening, Ryan sat with Aoife on a bench in a small garden near his building, recounting his unexpected elevator encounter. "I'm impressed," she said when he finished. "Most people would have been tempted to twist the knife." Ryan considered this. 6 months ago, I might have been, but seeing him like that, there was no satisfaction in it. "Because he's already facing consequences?" "Partly that." Ryan watched a pair of sparrows hopping along the path. "But mostly because I realized revenge has never been what I wanted." "What did you want?" Aoife asked, her question genuine rather than leading. "Initially, vindication, I suppose. Proof that my instincts were right." Ryan leaned back, the evening sun warm on his face. "But beyond that, what I really wanted was to trust myself again, to know that my judgment wasn't completely flawed. And now? Now I know my judgment was sound. I recognized something wasn't right in the relationship, even when Jade made me doubt myself. That validation doesn't need to come from seeing Dylan suffer." Aoife nodded thoughtfully. "There's wisdom in that. Revenge keeps you anchored to the past." "Exactly." Ryan turned toward her. "When I saw him in that elevator, looking so diminished, I realized something. Carrying anger toward him or Jade was only hurting me, not them." "So you've forgiven them?" Ryan considered the question carefully. "I think forgiveness is a process, not a moment. But I'm at peace with what happened. Their choices led to natural consequences. My choice to walk away led me here." He gestured to the garden, to London, to her. "I'd say that worked out rather well." Aoife smiled, her eyes reflecting the setting sun. "Indeed, it did." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the city sounds creating a gentle backdrop to their conversation. "You know what surprised me most?" Ryan said eventually. "Seeing Dylan as a person, not just as the other man. Recognizing that same human capacity for self-deception, for justifying bad choices one small step at a time." "That's a rare perspective," Aoife observed. Most people prefer the simplicity of villains and heroes. Life's rarely that simple, though, is it? Ryan watched the lengthening shadows. We're all capable of both harm and growth. Dylan, Jade, me, we all made choices. What matters is what we learn from them. As they rose to continue their evening walk, Ryan realized that the weight he'd carried since discovering Dylan's business card had finally lifted completely. Not because justice had been served, but because he'd chosen to move forward rather than remain anchored to the past, with dignity intact and wisdom gained. 1 month later, Ryan and Aoife strolled along the south bank, the Thames glittering in the late afternoon sunshine. Street performers and food vendors created a festive atmosphere as they made their way toward the London Eye. "I can't believe I've lived here 5 years and never done this," Aoife said, looking up at the massive observation wheel. "A proper tourist cliché," Ryan agreed with a smile. "But James insists the view is worth it." They joined the queue, falling into the easy conversation that had characterized their relationship from the first gallery meeting. 4 months of getting to know each other had revealed a connection unlike any Ryan had experienced before, built on mutual respect, shared interests, and an authenticity that still surprised him. "I received an interesting email today," Aoife said as they inched forward in line. "That publisher I interviewed with last month offered me the senior editor position." "Aoife, that's fantastic!" Ryan's enthusiasm was genuine. "The one with the international imprint?" She nodded, a mix of excitement and hesitation in her expression. "It would mean more responsibility, better pay, but also—" She paused. "It would involve quarterly trips to their New York office." "Ah." Ryan understood her concern. Their relationship was still relatively new, and distance had been a factor in his past relationship's downfall. "I wanted to discuss it with you before making a decision," she continued. "I know travel might bring up associations." Ryan appreciated her directness, the way she acknowledged his past without treating him as fragile. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I'm thinking I want the job," she said honestly, "but I also value what we're building. I don't want to make a decision that affects us without talking about it." The queue moved forward, bringing them to the boarding area. As they stepped into the glass capsule with several other visitors, Ryan considered her words. "You know what I've learned?" he said finally. "The problem in my past relationship wasn't distance, it was dishonesty. It was the lack of respect for boundaries." The capsule began its slow ascent, the city gradually unfolding beneath them. "I think you should take the job," Ryan continued. "It's an incredible opportunity. And quarterly trips with transparent communication are completely different from secret weekends." Aoife's relief was visible. "You're sure?" "Absolutely." Ryan took her hand. "Besides, I might even join you sometime. I've never been to New York." As their capsule reached the highest point, London stretched out in all directions. The winding river, the historic buildings alongside modern skyscrapers, the parks and neighborhoods extending to the horizon. Ryan felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought him here. "It's strange," he said quietly. "If you'd told me a year ago that Jade's deception would ultimately lead me to a better life, I wouldn't have believed it." "That's the thing about life," Aoife replied, her hand warm in his. "The most painful chapters often precede the most beautiful ones." As they began their descent, Ryan felt the truth of her words. The painful ending with Jade hadn't been the conclusion of his story, but rather the necessary catalyst for something more authentic. Not just with Aoife, but with himself, a life built on truth, respect, and the courage to honor his own worth. The city below, once foreign and intimidating, now felt like home, Not just a place of refuge, but a place of possibility. A new chapter, written on his own terms.